Marcus Licinius Crassus was once called the richest man in Rome. Not the loudest, not the most beloved, but the wealthiest, by far. He lived in the 1st century before the birth of Christ, in a time when the Republic of Rome was more ambition than empire. Stretching across Italy, growing into Gaul, gazing eastward with hungry eyes, Crassus had made his fortune, quietly and cunningly. After the civil war between Sulla and Marius had ravaged the city, Crassus bought up homes and estates, cheap, ruined, abandoned. He rebuilt them and sold them at a profit. He employed teams of skilled builders and even created what we might think of today as one of the first fire brigades, not entirely out of kindness, but out of opportunity. When a building caught fire, Crassus would offer to buy it on the spot. For a small price, of course. Only once the deed was his would his team put the flames out. It sounds harsh, but in a city of ambition and cunning, it was simply clever. People whispered about his wealth. Gold, land, silver mines in Spain. And yet, despite all his riches, Crassus always wanted something more. Something called gloria. The respect and admiration of the Roman people. You see, in Rome, money was never quite enough. True greatness came from victories. From battlefields, not bank accounts. So Crassus, even in his older years, sought a war to win, and glory to call his own. Crassus didn't act alone. He was part of what historians call the first triumvirate. 3 powerful men sharing power behind the scenes. There was Julius Caesar, the charming general, always smiling, always planning. And Pompey the Great, a brilliant commander, with piercing eyes and a sharp reputation. Crassus was the oldest among them. Quieter, perhaps more careful, but also sometimes overlooked. He longed for a war of his own. Caesar had Gaul, Pompey had the East, and Crassus had money. But money, as we've said, wasn't enough. So Crassus set his eyes to the east, to the golden lands of Parthia, beyond the desert, beyond the rivers, where horsemen rode like wind, and the cities glimmered like forgotten jewels. Parthia was not like Rome. It was older in many ways, rooted in Persian tradition, full of archers, silk, and silence. Its armies didn't march in tight legions, but moved like whispers across sand. But Crassus didn't see that. He saw gold and glory. In 53 BCE, Crassus marched east. He brought with him around 40,000 men. Legionaries in shining armor, sandals stirring dust with each steady step. They crossed the plains of Syria, passed through cities filled with strange spices, date palms, and curious stairs. The road to Parthia was not paved like Roman highways. It was open land. Quiet. With the hum of insects and the whisper of dry grass. Local governors warned him to be cautious. A desert was not like Gaul. The Parthians were not disorganized tribes. But Crassus believed in numbers, in legions, in discipline. He ignored the warnings. And so, they marched toward the town of Carrhae. As they approached Carrhae, Crassus's army made camp. Tents were set, shields rested against spears, fires crackled low. There was no rush, only the quiet before something unknown. In the calm of evening, soldiers sharpened their blades. But many talked quietly of home, of wives in Capua, of vineyards waiting for harvest. They didn't know what kind of war they were walking into. The Parthians, led by a man named Serena, watched from afar. They didn't come close. Not yet. Instead, they let the wind do the talking. And in that wind, you could almost hear the distant hooves of horses. One morning, not long after the sun had quietly lifted itself over the desert sky, Parthian riders appeared. They did not ride forward in great numbers at first. Just a few, moving slowly, with silver-edged helmets and long, curved bows slung across their shoulders. Their horses were quiet, sleek, almost regal. Their armor gleamed not like Roman steel, but like polished bronze and silk. They asked for Crassus to meet them. There, in the openness of the plain, Parthian and Roman envoys stood facing one another, the wind lifting strands of cloth, the language of peace mingling with the sharp scent of sand. But it was not truly peace they discussed. The Parthians had come to delay, to confuse, and Crassus, already deep into foreign land, did not see it. Some of his commanders urged caution. One, a clever man named Cassius. Yes, the same Cassius who would one day stand among Caesar's assassins, warned Crassus to wait, to think, to return. But Crassus pressed forward. The open desert stretched before them. And just beyond it, something unseen. The place they came to be remembered for was Carrhae, an old town, quiet and somewhat forgotten, resting near the edge of the Euphrates. It had once been part of Mesopotamia, cradled between rivers and memories. But now it was Roman territory. The land around Carrhae was wide and flat. No trees, no shade, just dry soil, the smell of sunburnt grass, and the feeling that something was watching. It was there that Crassus's army met the Parthians. Not a disorganized band, but tens of thousands of horse archers and heavily armored cavalry known as cataphracts. The Romans stood in their rigid lines, forming their famous testudo, shields raised, tight and square, a wall of iron and discipline. But the Parthians did not charge. They circled, they danced, and then they began to fire. Arrow after arrow, from great distances, rained down from the sky. The kind of arrows that whistled like ghosts. Each one silent until it landed. The Romans waited for them to run out. But the Parthians had brought camels carrying spare quivers. There would be no pause, no running dry. And so, the Romans stood, hour after hour, under the sky, under the arrows. Night fell over the plain. The Parthians did not leave. They rested, quietly, nearby. Their fires were small, their movements graceful. The Romans, meanwhile, lay under their shields. Some whispered to the stars. Some dreamed of rain. Some, perhaps, listened to the silence and thought of home. In ancient war, death was not always sudden. Sometimes it came softly, wearing the disguise of exhaustion. And it was exhaustion that crept into Crassus's camp. There was little food, less water, and no clear path forward. Some legions broke off during the night, trying to find safety. Others stayed, too tired to move. Crassus himself sat quietly, we imagine, in a command tent, lit by flickering lamp, with maps spread before him and no answers at all. By morning, Crassus attempted to parley. A meeting was arranged with the Parthian commander, Serena. Crassus, unsure and weary, was hesitant. But under pressure from his remaining officers, he agreed. They met on a low hill between the two forces. Crassus wore his general's cloak. Serena wore polished armor and carried himself like a noble from another world. There were disagreements. An argument, perhaps. And then, amid confusion, a struggle broke out. Some say Crassus tried to pull away. Others say a scuffle began between guards. But it ended quietly. Crassus did not return. Crassus died there, in that foreign place. Far from Rome. Far from the villas he once purchased. Far from the coins that once bore his face. Much later, legends grew around his end. One said the Parthians, mocking his greed, poured molten gold into his mouth. But perhaps that tale is just that, a tale. What we know for sure is this. The sands of Carrhae covered his footsteps, and Rome moved on, as empires often do. Serena would be celebrated briefly, and then forgotten. Cassius would return to Rome, one day to raise a dagger not at Parthians, but at Caesar. And Crassus, he became a quiet lesson in ambition. Not a warning, really, but a memory of what happens when wealth dreams of something more. And now, as the sands settle, and the campfires fade, we leave Crassus there, among the echoes of his story, not as a man of defeat, not as a villain or a fool, but simply as someone who once walked beneath the same stars you do now. The world turns quietly. Empires rise and fall and rise again. But you are safe. You are still. And there is nothing more you need to do tonight. So close your eyes. Let the thoughts drift away. Let the weight of history settle gently at your feet. Tomorrow will come. But tonight, let sleep come first. Good night, dear listener. And rest well.